Hi and welcome back. If you remember, in the last video I briefly spoke about name ranges. In this video I'm going to talk to you about name ranges much more in detail. Not only will we understand what exactly a name range is, but we will also understand their importance and how to work with them. We will understand how to create them, resize them, delete them, and yes, there's one more important aspect about them that I will talk to you about, and that is scoping of the named range. So let's begin. In Microsoft Excel, we can name a cell or a group of cells referred to as range. Now the very first question that can come to your mind is, but why name a range? What are the advantages of naming a range? Well, it's a very good question. There are three main benefits of naming a range. Let me explain the benefits with an example. Here I have a list of employees. We will use this data to demonstrate the benefits. I've already named the range here. We will use this name for the demonstration. Later in the video, I will also demonstrate how to create the name and how to work with it. So, benefit number one. You can use the names to quickly navigate to cells through the name box drop-down menu. So this is the name box. If you click on the drop-down, you will notice the name of the range. Let's click on it. Excel immediately selects the range with that name. So this is the first benefit. It's easier to navigate. The second benefit. A meaningful range name, for example, fruits or employees, is much easier to remember than a range address, such as A2 to A11, which may either contain a list of fruits or a list of employees. Having said that, just naming is not enough. Giving a proper name is more important. This way, you can use the names in formulas and VBA code. You do not need to remember their cell addresses. To demonstrate this, let's launch the Visual Basic Editor by pressing the shortcut key Alt F11. If you're not sure what Visual Basic Editor is, then I recommend watching the video Visual Basic Editor and Introduction. Here I have 5 modules. We will go through them one by one. Let's open the first module. You can either double click on this module or you can right click on it and click on View Code. Here I have a procedure called Benefit 1. In this procedure, I have declared a worksheet object and then here I am initializing it. Finally, I am counting the number of employees in range A2 to A11 using application.countA. So if I go to sheet 1, this is the range that I am referring to, which has the name of employees. Now let's go back and let's run this code. To run this code, click on the Run Sub-User Form button or simply press the shortcut key F5. You will notice that we get the count of employees. In this code, if you noticed, I am using a hard-coded cell address which is A2 to A11. Now imagine you have got different ranges with different set of data. For example, you have departments, you have designations and so on. Would it not be amazing if you could just pass a name instead of a cell address? For example, range employees, range department, range designations. It would, right? So this is the second benefit. You can pass the name in a formula or a VBA code instead of actual cell addresses. Let's go back. So let's go ahead and let's change the code. I'm going to replace the cell address with the named range, which is employees. Now let's run this. And I get the same result. Now coming to the third benefit. Let me click on OK. The third benefit is that you do not lose the reference with the defined range even when you add rows and columns before the named range. To understand this, let's go to sheet 1. So if you notice that the employee names are in column A, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert a column. So now the employee names have shifted to column B. I'm going to go back to the code and I'm going to run this. See, I'm getting the correct result. Had I used A2 to A11 there in the code, I would not have got 10 because the employee names are not there anymore in range A2 to A11. So this is the third benefit. You do not lose reference with named ranges. Moving on. Now let's understand how can we create a range. To add or create a new name, we have to use the names.add method. The syntax is expressions.add name refers to visible, macro type, shortcut key, category, name local refers to local, category local refers to R1C1 and refers to R1C1 local. All of these parameters are optional, whether it is name, refers to, visible, etc. etc. The name specifies the text in English to use as the name if the name local parameter is not specified. Name cannot include spaces and cannot be formatted as cell references. Refers to describes what the name refers to in English using A1 style notation. If the refers to local, refers to R1C1 and refers to R1C1 local parameters are not specified. Visible, if set to true, specifies that the name is defined as visible. False specified that the name is defined as hidden. A hidden name does not appear in the define name, paste name or go to dialog box. By default, this value is true. Macro type is determined by one of the following values, which is user defined function, macro or omitted. That means it's none. Shortcut key specifies the macro shortcut key. It must be a single letter such as lowercase z or uppercase z. Applies only for command macros. Category is the category of the macro or the function if the macro type argument equals 1 or 2. The category is used in the function wizard. Name local specifies the localized text to use as the name if the name parameter is not specified. Again, name cannot include spaces and cannot be formatted as cell references. Refers to local describes what the name refers to in localized text using A1 style notation if the refers to R1C1 and refers to R1C1 local parameters are not specified. Category local specifies the localized text that identifies the category of a custom function if the category parameter is not specified. Refers to R1C1 describes what the name refers to in English using R1 style notation if the refers to local and refers to R1C1 local parameters are not specified. Refers to R1C1 local describes what the name refers to in localized text using R1C1 style notation if the refers to local and refers to R1C1 parameters are not specified. So remember all these when you are creating a named range. Before we create the first name, first let's visually understand the new name dialog box. Understanding this is very crucial when you are creating named ranges. Let's go to sheet 1 for a moment. I'm going to delete this extra column that we inserted. Here in column C, I have some sample designations. And in sheet 2, I have second set of designations. You will understand in a moment why I have two sets of designations. So let's go back. Click on the Formulas tab and then click on Name Manager. Next, click on New button and you will be presented with a new name dialog box. This section is where you define a name. This section is for scope. This decides the scope of a named range. So if you click on the drop down, the scope can be at workbook level or at worksheet level. And when I say worksheet level, it can be at any individual worksheet level, sheet 1, sheet 2 or sheet 3 since I have 3 worksheets. Now let's understand the scope with respect to the designations that we have in 2 worksheets. When the scope is at workbook level, the names of the range has to be unique, which means you cannot have duplicate range names. You cannot name the range in sheet 1 with the same name that you assign to the range in sheet 2. So the names have to be unique. But when the scope is at worksheet level, then you get to create same named ranges. So you can define two named ranges called, say, designations, one which has the scope workbook and the other which has the scope as sheet 2. Again, in the same sheet, you cannot have duplicate names. We will test this in a moment. This section is for comment, very useful when you have two named ranges with the same name. I hardly use this, and that is because I name my named ranges appropriately. Just by looking at the names, I know what that name range is for. So feel free to use it if you want to. The last section is refers to. In this scenario, the refers to will show you the address of the relevant range. Now let's go back and view the code in module 2 where I already have kept a sample code ready. Here I have declared my workbook object, two worksheet objects and two range objects. Here I am initializing the worksheet object, one for sheet 1 and the other for sheet 2. I have also initialized the two ranges, one for the designations in sheet 1 and the other in sheet 2. In this section, I am creating a name called designations. Few things that you need to keep in mind when you are declaring names. First, the names can begin with a backslash, alphabet or an underscore. So you can have names like backslash designations, designations, or underscore designations. Second, the names cannot contain spaces, tabs, or any punctuation marks. Third, the length of the name cannot be 0 or exceed 255 characters. Though I do not see the need to use 255 characters. You can have one character names, but you cannot use alphabets like R and C, which are reserved by Excel. Fourth, you cannot use cell addresses as names. For example, you cannot use A1 or A1 first three letters of my name and adding 1 to it. For example, Sid1. And that is because there is actually a cell in Excel with that address. So remember these 4 points when you are naming your range objects. Also, if you notice, I have WB here, which means that the scope of this name is at workbook level. And here I have WSB, which means that the scope of this name is at sheet 2 level. Let's run this and see what happens. Let's go to the worksheet, and now I'm going to click on formulas, name manager, and I get the name manager dialog box. If you notice, now we have two named ranges called designations. Here you will see the address of the range to which this named range refers to. Here you can see the scope of the name. One is at sheet 2 level and the other is at workbook level. So let's go back. In this code, we knew the range address. There are times when you want to create a name range from the currently selected range. In such a case, you can use wb.names.add designations, selection. Having said that, I'll never recommend you to use selection. There's a high probability that you may end up with an error or an unexpected result if you're not careful. Now, what happens when we declare names at workbook level and worksheet level? When you declare the name at the worksheet level, then you need to fully qualify the range when using it. If you do not do that, then you may get an error. To understand this, let's view the code in the third module. Most of the code is the same as the code in module 2. Here I am displaying the name of the worksheet to which this range refers to. Before I run this, what I will do is I will first delete the named range designations which has a workbook level scope. So I'll go back to the worksheet. I'll click on formulas, name manager. This is the one which I want to delete, and then I'll click on delete. I'll say yes, I want to delete it, and I'll close this. Now I will make sheet 2 active. There's a reason why I made sheet 2 active. Now let's go back to the code. Let's try and run this code. You will notice that I get the name of the worksheet. While this works, this is not the right way to do it because we have not fully qualified the range object. To understand this, what we will do is we will make sheet 3 active. Okay, now let's go back to the code. Let's try and run this. And I get a runtime error 1004. Method range of object underscore global failed. If I click on debug, it highlights this line. We are getting this error because the code is trying to find the range in the active sheet. So remember to always fully qualify your objects. Now if I stop the code and if I add WSB to this code. So what I'm doing is I'm fully qualifying the range. And now if I run this, it will give me sheet 2. Even though sheet 3 is active. So like I said, always remember to fully qualify your objects. Now let's go back and recreate the named range which we had deleted. If I go back and I click on Formulas Name Manager, you will notice that the designations with workbook as scope has been recreated. Let's go to the scoping explain module. Now if I delete WSB and if I run this code, note sheet 3 is still active. Now if I run this, I will not get an error. I will get sheet 1. Right now it is referring to the named range designations which has a scope at workbook level and which is referring to sheet 1. In such a scenario, there is no need to fully qualify the range. So I hope the scoping part is very clear. I usually avoid setting the scope of the range at worksheet level. I always declare them at workbook level. And like I mentioned earlier, I never use duplicate names. I prefer using descriptive names so that just by looking at it, I know what that named range is for. The next thing that we will now learn is how to delete a named range. Let's see the code in 4th module. To delete a named range, simply use the .names.delete method. If you want to delete the named range which has a particular worksheet as scope, then use worksheet.names.delete. If you want to delete the named range which has a workbook as a scope, then use workbooks.names.delete. Okay, an interesting question for you. But first, let me ensure that sheet 2 is active. Also, if you notice that we still have those two named ranges, one which has sheet 2 as scope and the other workbook as scope. Let's go back to the code. So here is my question. Think before you answer. If I run this code, which of these names will be deleted? This one or this one? If this is the first time you're working with named ranges and if your answer is the named range which refers to sheet 2, then you are goddamn right. Give yourself a pat on your shoulder. If I could come out of the screen, I would have done that for you. You have to be very careful here if you have two named ranges with the same name. I will also take this opportunity to mention about an important bug which Excel has. If you have two named ranges with the same name and if the worksheet is active to which one of the name refers to, and if you want to delete the named range which has workbook as a scope, then you will have to deactivate the worksheet and then delete it. Otherwise, it will always delete the named range which has worksheet as a scope. If you want to understand how to delete the named range which has workbook as a scope without deactivating the sheet, then visit the mrexcel.com link which is mentioned in the description below. That is where I have shown you how to delete the named range which has workbook as a scope without deactivating the worksheet. Moving on. The next thing that we will learn is how to resize a named range using VBA. Let's go to the 5th module. There are times when your list may shrink or grow. In such a case, you may want to resize the named range. To resize a named range, you have to use range.resize property. The syntax is expression.resize row size, column size. Both the parameters are optional. Row size is the number of rows in the new range. If this argument is omitted, the number of rows in the range remains the same. Column size is the number of columns in the new range. If this argument is omitted, then the number of columns in the range remains the same. So here we will create a new named range called departments. Let's run this. Let's go to the worksheet. I'm going to click on formulas, name manager, and here you will see that we have created a named range called departments, which is referring to sheet 1 E2 to E12, which is this range. Now, what if you added, let's say, finance and dispatch to the list? If you go to the name box and if you click on departments, you will notice it is only selecting cell E2 to E12. But now what I want is the department's named range should also include these two cells. So basically it should have the range A2 to A14. For this, we will use the resize property to tell VBA to include these two rows. Let me quickly write the code and then I will explain what we are doing. So let's go back. Here I have declared a variable lRow, which will be used to get the last row of the range. And if you notice, I am subtracting 1 from it. Why am I doing this? If I go back here, you will notice that I have header here. If I did not have that header, I wouldn't have subtracted it. So I want the range from E2 to E14 and hence I am subtracting 1 from it. Here I am telling VBA to resize and include the relevant rows and name it at the same time as departments. So let's run this. If you go to the worksheet and if you click on formulas, name manager, you will notice that the department's named range now includes range E2 to E14, which is here. So let's close this. The next question that you may have is, where all can we use named ranges? If you saw the last video, I used a named range in a data validation list. You can also use named ranges in charts, pivots, formulas, and so many other places. You can also, let's say, format these ranges or interact with them like you do for normal range objects. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, you do not need to remember the cell addresses anymore. Just give meaningful names to your ranges and then easily work with them. Time for a quick recap. In this video, we covered about name ranges much more in detail. Not only did we understand what exactly is a name range, but we also understood its importance and how to work with it, how to create it, resize it, delete it, and so many other things. We also understood one more important aspect of name range, which is scoping of name range. So I hope this video was easy to understand, but if you still have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below. Or you can also email me on support@teamexcel.com. I also have a Facebook page, feel free to join that. The link is in the description below. If you have any questions, please post it there. I'll be more than happy to answer your questions. A quick reminder, I'll be posting 2 videos every week, one on Monday and the other on Thursday. So if you like the kind of content that I'm putting up in the channel and if you would like to extend support, then go ahead, watch a couple of videos, drop a couple of likes, and if you're really serious about learning Visual Basic Programming from scratch, then go ahead and see the playlist, because that is where I have kept the videos in a specific sequence. They'll really help you out. So watch them, drop likes there as well, and if you still have not subscribed to this channel, then go ahead and subscribe to this channel by clicking on the bell icon. And I'll see you in the next video when I talk to you about conditional formatting in detail. We will learn how to conditionally format our worksheets.